Hi, I'm Alyssa Nadworny, and this is NPR's Book of the Day. Today, two novels with tech at the center. In a minute, a book from horror writer Paul Tremblay about a gamer who takes on an odd job. But first, climate journalist and author Nathaniel Rich's new book, Cloudthief, the story of a hacker and a journalist who team up to rob a data center in Oklahoma, going after all the precious information and memories stored in the cloud. Rich talked with Here and Now host Indira Lakshmanan.
This message comes from BetterHelp. One of the hardest parts about starting therapy? Not knowing what to expect. Instead of listening to an ad, hear from the people who've actually been there. Visit betterhelp.com/reviews to explore real client reviews that are updated every day. With an average live therapy session rating of 4.9 out of 5, based on more than 1.7 million client session reviews, the feedback speaks for itself. Visit betterhelp.com/reviews.
In Nathaniel Rich's new novel, Cloudthief, a mysterious hacker living off the grid in a Manhattan mini storage unit and a disaffected climate journalist team up for a new kind of heist, robbing the cloud and the valuable secrets hidden within. We talk about the cloud as if it's a celestial, weightless ether where our digital photos and emails just float. But Rich's story is a stark reminder that all of those memories live in a physical place, massive, energy-hungry data centers that are hidden gold mines.
The most valuable thing in the world is no longer money, or jewels or artwork. It's data. And all of this data lives in these Fort Knoxes that no one really talked about called data centers.
Again, the novel is Cloudthief, and journalist and author Nathaniel Rich recently joined me from NPR New York. I began by asking him where he got the idea for the heist of a data center.
I think it must have come from a piece I reported many years ago about a group of people who were connected to the WikiLeaks organization and Julian Assange, who were extremely concerned about privacy, surveillance, and this sort of coming age that we've now entered of tech corporations controlling every aspect of our lives. And I remember a conversation with one of these activists who told me, Google is more powerful than any country in the world. And I said, because they're, so rich? He said, no, in their servers, they have information that could compromise any political leader, any CEO, any news organization, any military. Everybody uses these servers, and they own all of it. And that kind of staggered me.
Well, I think it's true that most of us think of the cloud as something ethereal, that all of our information is up in the air somewhere. And you address that in the book. Can you read a passage for us from page 59?
Yes. These fortresses of information were imagined to be as weightless as a mass of fine water droplets. Their security seemed tied to data's ephemerality. If our information was everywhere, it was nowhere. But our information was somewhere. It lived on servers. Computers without monitors or keyboards, sleek rectangular black boxes dotted with blinking LEDs. Data servers were stacked in cabinets that resembled commercial baking racks in Pentagon-scale warehouses. The largest of these centers tended to be built on the margin between exurbs and rural sprawl, areas with cheap water, abundant land, and cheap utility costs. Places like Pryor, Oklahoma.
Well, you write that we've been conditioned to think of data as weightless, that it's a strategy by tech companies to hide the physical and environmental costs of our digital lives and all those memories being uploaded. Talk about those costs.
If you combined all the data centers in the world into a state, it would rank only behind Texas in terms of energy use. And I think they're bound to pass Texas in the coming year. The chips require enormous amounts of energy, usually powered by gas and coal plants. You also need a lot of water to cool down the machines so they don't explode. And so the environmental costs are enormous. The greenhouse gas imprint is enormous. And the companies have been extremely secretive about this business for a very long time, and essentially until the present day when AI has kind of revealed everything.
Right. Well, when Virginia, one of the main characters, the woman who's living off the grid, and Tim, the pseudonym that she gives to the journalist who's the narrator, arrive at the data center in Oklahoma for the first time, this immense collection of data that they find in front of them feels menacing, like the Death Star. Was it a shock for you to research for this book just how much of our lives, from classified war plans at the Pentagon to cutting-edge science trials to emails that could implicate business leaders or politicians in crimes, is just sitting there in these warehouses without a ton of security?
Yeah, it's funny. The focus has been on cybersecurity, really, in the last 20, 30 years. And I've spoken with a bunch of security experts, and they feel like there's been a real disservice in focusing so much on cybercrime, because as those defenses have been built up, there's much less concern about the prospect of physical security. I mean, one of these experts said something to the effect to me of, you can have the fanciest cyber protections in the world, but if it's left in a janitor's closet, it's a lot of good it's going to do you. And I remember a big moment for me in the research of the novel where I basically was trying to figure out how to hack into Google's biggest data center, which is in Pryor, Oklahoma. They started at some point putting promotional videos of the data center online to try to make them seem very friendly and fun, and people walking around with pinwheel hats and skateboards and stuff. But then I couldn't help but notice in one of the frames, and I paused it like there's a Zapruder film, the security guards were pictured, and I zoomed in, and you could see on their labels that their uniforms, it wasn't some like Google security system or some police force. It was a third party, like local, like subcontractor. And I thought, this doesn't quite match the value of what's being held, which is no less than the sum of civilizational knowledge, basically, in these centers. And I thought, well, this is sort of funny. This is a vulnerability. And then I started to do research and found that actually some people had pulled off quite dramatically these heists of data centers in the past.
Well, let's talk about that, because you just published a New York Times Magazine story in which you wrote about the real-life heist of servers from a data center back in 2007. Tell us about that.
It's the craziest story I came across. It was these 5 heist men in the UK led by this ringleader named Terry Ellis. And these 5 guys dressed up as police officers. They hired a fake police dog. They walked up to this massive data center in the heart of King's Cross, London. They were hired by some shadowy figures that still don't know a ton about, but they were hired to extract 80 servers from the facility, and they convinced the guards to let them in. They convinced the guards to handcuff themselves. There's a kind of ingenious process here. And they took the servers and made off with them. And they might have gotten away with it were it not for a couple slip-ups about 9 months later, and 2 of the ringleaders were caught, but the others have never been caught. And Terry says they're very rich and prosperous to this day.
Well, related to this, you write that data center heists belong to a rare class of crime in which the victim participates in the cover-up to protect their reputation. When a thief dropped through the ceiling of an AIG data center, the company only reported the loss of $10,000 worth of hardware, not the priceless value of medical records of 1 million people that were on that server. Talk about the implications of that kind of corporate silence.
Yeah, it's a kind of perfect crime. And of course, that plays into the novel. They realize if they can get away with it, they might end up having the cooperation of the data center and covering up the crime. But yeah, it's more important for these businesses to promote the idea that they're invulnerable, that your data is safe. So they'd rather eat the cost than go public with it, which, posed some problems in the research phase of the book, because I kept finding examples of these heists that it was always the same PR approach where the business would say, oh, they just damaged some computers, or, the web browser went down for a little while, but nothing important was taken. But of course, no one would be going into these data centers and trying to pull off these crimes if they just wanted computer parts. There's a lot of easier ways of doing that. That always struck me as bizarre, and it's something I could play with in the novel.
So what do you want readers to come away with? Is this novel an alarm, a wake-up call to think about the vast quantities of the world's data out there, what's being done with it, and what its environmental impact is?
I hope that the novel, really like anything I write, allows readers to think more deeply about the world around us, the ways we might feel trapped, and to come up with one's own solution to that. These are very subjective questions. You see it in climate change. To what degree do we want to obsess about climate change, work on it, try to ignore it. Everyone has their own response to that question. And same with the kind of data techno state. And I think through fiction, through narrative, the reader has an opportunity to think more deeply about their own place in this new reality that we've entered.
That's novelist and journalist Nathaniel Rich. His new novel about a heist at a data center is called Cloudthief. Nathaniel Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
This message comes from Wayfair. Shop furniture and decor that's built to last, with options that fit your style and your budget. See real customer photos and feedback before you buy. Join Wayfair Rewards to get 5% back on every purchase and start saving on your next home upgrade. Head to wayfair.com to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
Best-selling horror writer Paul Tremblay's new book, Dead But Dreaming of Electric Sheep, centers around a gamer who takes a job guiding a man in a vegetative state using AI implanted in his brain across the country. It's a wild ride. Tremblay spoke with Here and Now host Tiziana Deering.
Best-selling author Paul Tremblay is known for horror novels like The Cabin at the End of the World and Horror Movie. And in his latest book, he turns his attention to artificial intelligence, imagining a nightmare that feels a little too possible. Dead But Dreaming of Electric Sheep finds a gamer controlling a man who's in a vegetative state, using a device connected to artificial intelligence implanted in his brain. The gamer's task, as she puts it, is, quote, to remote control this dead dude across the country. The dead dude makes that job increasingly complicated. He may not be so dead. And other forces interested in the tech's potential use pose obstacles too. Again, the book is Dead But Dreaming of Electric Sheep, and Paul Tremblay joins us in the studio. Paul, good to talk to you again.
My pleasure, Tiziana.
So let's talk about the two people at the center of the book. We've got Julia, the gamer. She's a bit of a slacker. She's the child of a highly successful tech CFO, recruits her for the job. And it's to remote control the dead guy that she calls Bernie,
Yep.
who she's told is an employee of the company who had an accident. You call him Bernie in reference to the 80s film Weekend at Bernie's. Was that your inspiration here?
Not the film itself, but like the strange what if. I was actually reading Mary Roach's book Stiff, which maybe one does if you're a horror writer, just for fun, because it's a book about what happens to the body afterwards. And I think there was a passage where she was discussing the transportation of bodies via plane. I don't know, I just flashed on the weird image of having a dead person sitting next to me, but someone's controlling him, which very much seemed like a very silly idea that I didn't take seriously. But then fast forward a couple of years, when I joined a class action lawsuit suing OpenAI, ChatGPT on behalf of writers. And from what I learned about the company, that what if occurred to me, I was like, oh no, that's not that silly. Companies like that would totally do this if they could make money without any sort of question of ethics or morality.
So it was interesting. As soon as I saw that this book of yours was about artificial intelligence, I thought about that lawsuit. You and I have talked about it before. And the fact that AI was, at least in that case, you're concerned about scraping, without permission, copyright violation, a bit of a professional horror for you. Does AI fundamentally scare you, Paul?
It does. At the moment, it's more like infuriating. I think some of the tone around it is purposeful by corporations. They want you to be afraid and feel like you're going to be left behind if you don't use it. What I find actually more frightening / frustrating are people who say, oh, well, you have to use it because it's not going away. It's like, that's just not true. Like, I don't understand why you would just so willingly accept something that, you think is wrong or you don't want to use or you don't think it's going to add to you in some way. Never mind the fact that these LLMs, that's the other insidious part,
large learning models, which is how AI learns and is trained.
Well, AI is such a blanket term, and again, I think corporations do that on purpose. That's different than like an AI that's going to just solely look at data within a hospital to help with diagnoses. That's different than LLMs are just sophisticated algorithms that predict what the next word is going to be, and those are built off of stolen books. So I'm very much a hardliner against it. And if you're using it to write or do art or music, you're not an artist or a musician or a writer. You're a scab. Purposely using union language there.
Paul, you're not pulling any punches in your view of corporate AI, of large language models. You clearly see something dark here.
Yeah.
I wonder, though, is there any AIA that you've ever used or that you've ever seen touch someone in your life in positive ways? Because there is a lot that artificial intelligence can do around, as you've mentioned, healthcare, for example.
Right. So I haven't used it ever. I mean, let me back up a little bit. In early 23, when Midjourney came out, that was like the first visual artist AI. When that came out, like I had no idea what it was. And people were posting, here's computer imagined cover for Cabinet at the End of the World. And I was like, that's kind of cool. I just reshared it until an artist friend said, hey, do you know how that's made? They've taken our works, haven't paid us, and we don't have permission. So until the day comes where we're paid fairly and we're given the permission to opt in or opt out, like I just see there's no ethical way that LLMs could be used.
So I want to come back now to the way that you insert this AI that you find frustrating into this genre that you're very good at, which is horror, right? Because it is a horrific idea that there's maybe somebody you don't even know, right? Imagine you're the vegetative or dead body on the plane, right? And there's a person sitting next to you that you don't even know who can control you because somebody has put something artificial in your brain that is taking over. But it's interesting, Paul, because there are times when I think you make the bad guys the corporation, and then sometimes I feel like you're making the bad guys the collaborator, like a Julia, and other times it's the artificial intelligence itself. Who is the bad guy?
That's the tricky part. I mean, we start with corporations. I think I wasn't necessarily thinking of the bad guy. I think for most of my novels and the connection, and especially in this one is, I hope that people, when they read about these characters and they maybe do something that they think they wouldn't do or they find distasteful, that the readers would come to the realization, but for a few things that had happened in my life, maybe that would be me. Like, I don't want you to sympathize with the characters, but I do want you to empathize, to understand like how they might have made these decisions.
Who do you empathize with? Is it the person with the controller or is it the person being controlled?
I think the one being controlled is the big fear. I think the good news is, hopefully the tech that I'm talking about doesn't exist and won't exist. We'll see. But I mean, I think the universal fear of being controlled is like, an existential sort of fear. Whether it's like an AI or maybe more realistically, especially now that I'm getting older, fears of Alzheimer's, dementia, things like, what happens to the mind, which is so quintessentially what you are, the thing that you keep secret a lot of times from other people. But what if that is being changed without your permission? It's being changed without you knowing. And like, are you anymore? So I find that fundamentally terrifying. But also Julia, I think, her journey through the book is, first I'm doing that, she's doing this because she's economically desperate. But the further she goes, she realizes like, I can't be a part of this.
There's another set of decisions that you make in the book that I want to talk about for a minute.
Sure.
First, there are places where you break the fourth wall.
Yes.
And in fact, at one point you write 2 pages of text saying, hey, you can try to trick large language learning models by putting in some stuff that kind of don't make sense. And it feels like you're doing that yourself on those 2 pages. But you also have, I think, if I understand the last page of the book correctly, you have artificial intelligence generated font. You mess with page format. Sometimes there's a single sentence. We'll see literally words falling off the page.
Yeah.
You're breaking the form here.
Yeah, I have to admit, like, I'm a sucker for fun typographical stuff, but like if I'm going to use it, I think hard about it. Like I want to make sure it's there, not for a gimmick, but because it's the best way to tell the story. And so for when we'll call him Bernie for now, when we're in Bernie's head, I really wanted to try to get as close to replicating as possible, just how unmooring that would feel. And the use of some of the typographical stuff is just literally sometimes the pieces of his mind. And then eventually I felt like I really needed a visual way to differentiate between maybe the 2 parts of Bernie's mind that start having a discussion as well.
Yeah, I mean, there is layer upon layer here. There are 2 more things that are on my mind.
Yes.
In the last line of your acknowledgments, it says in part, quote, I hope you'll continue to support human-created art and reject any and all AI slop and shame the slop purveyors. Is this book at some level a call to action to your readers?
I mean, it is, for sure. Hopefully without being too didactic. So obviously in the acknowledgments, I could get a little bit more direct. But no, unfortunately, I mean, the idea that we have to rely on the government and corporations to save us, it's just, we know that's not going to happen. So, it's really up to readers and writers too. I mean, writers can't use this stuff. They should not be using it. And every time I see someone in The Guardian, or the Polish author, Nobel Prize winner, talked about how she's using it now. It's like, why would you choose the way of the scab? I'm not saying I don't want to witch hunt. It's not like you should be picking through someone's book and deciding, oh, this is AI. That's not at all. But if people say, hey, I'm using this, or, I created a flyer, just say, no, that's not right. You should not be doing that.
The other thing that we've touched some on here is kind of what scares you, right? There's a little bit of AI, there's aging, there's what happens in our brain. You and I have done, I think it's 3 books now. We've talked about 3 of your books now. And I think it's fair to say that you have a flair for the truly disturbing. Sometimes your horror is violent, sometimes it's not, but it's always disturbing. And this ending reminded us both horror movie, Cabin at the End of the World, haunted for a while. And I wonder when you're going to enter that disturbing place. Do you go in willingly? Do you go in gleefully? Or do you go in sort of, no, I don't want to have to go here, but I have to go here?
I think it's a combination of gleefully and I have to go there. When I'm reading books or watching movies, I'm a scaredy cat, and things really bother me. But when I'm writing, I'm just so close to the gears, it doesn't affect me that way. I just try. It's almost like I'm putting the puzzle together, and I oddly get excited if I think something, oh, that's really messed up. I think that will affect readers, because that's what I want. I do want to make readers uncomfortable.
Why?
I think that's the point of art. Whether or not it's horror, I think all art should make you feel a little uncomfortable. It should make you test your beliefs. And it's okay to do that. Because what are your beliefs worth if you are unwilling to test them with something, if you are unwilling to confront them with something, which is, again, not only AI, but the insidiousness of social media, too, is we're not allowed to confront our beliefs because the algorithms serve us. And AI is like that on steroids. They want to make us into unthinking, servile corporate bots, with the large language models. So, yeah, I'm usually, it depends on the story. There is a lot of humor in this book. I hope it's also fun until it's disturbing. But yeah, it tends to be where my mind goes.
Well, horror author, best-selling author Paul Tremblay definitely has a view of AI, and you can get a feel for it in Dead But Dreaming of Electric Sheep. Paul, great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this week on NPR's Book of the Day. If you want more, you can sign up for our newsletter at npr.org/newsletter/books. I'm Melissa Nadworny. This podcast is produced by Chloe Weiner and edited by Megan Sullivan. Our founding editor is Petra Mayer. The show elements for this week were produced and edited by Jacob Fenston, Martin Patience, Justine Kennan, Erica Ryan, Janaea Williams, Elena Burnett, Todd Munt, and Emiko Tamagawa. Thanks for listening. It has been so fun reading along with you all of these months.
This message comes from Capella University. You know that feeling when there's a spark building inside you, that you were meant for more? That's your own drive pushing you towards what's next. Capella University gets that. With their FlexPath learning format, you can set the pace and earn your degree without putting life on pause. You've built experience and know what you're capable of. Now, this is your time to turn that momentum into more. The only real question is, what can't you do? Learn more at capella.edu.
This message comes from Jerry. Many people are overpaying on car insurance. Why? Switching providers can be a pain. Jerry helps make the process painless. Jerry is the only app that compares rates from over 50 insurers in minutes and helps you switch fast with no spam calls or hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Before you renew your car insurance policy, download the Jerry app or head to jerry.ai/NPR.